That's it. We've got everyone, so we're good to go now.
Fantastic. Thank you. So we're going live now as well, yes? Great.
Yes.
So welcome everybody to our virtual meeting of RBKC's licensing subcommittee, and thank you all for attending. I'm Councillor Soph McVeigh, and I'll be chairing this meeting. It's being held via Microsoft Teams, and it's also being streamed live. The committee for this hearing comprises of myself and Councillor Schmetterling and Councillor Blakeman. Councillors, can you please introduce yourself?
I'm Councillor Judith Blakeman, Nottingdale Ward.
I'm Dory Schmetterling and Councillor for Pembridge Ward, just north of Notting Hill Gate.
Thank you. We're joined remotely by Paul Phelan and Sharon Dybel for the Council's licensing team, also by Keith Mahaffey from the Council's Noise and Nuisance team, and our legal officer, Lindsay Lemazurier. Also with us are our committee officers, Isabel Saunders. Isabel will be monitoring all our connections and help with any technical issues we may have. And she's supported by Yasmin and Leonie. Before we start this case, just a few ground rules. Please, can everyone keep their microphones on mute? And please, can everyone turn their cameras off, apart from the committee members for now? And please, can you make sure any mobile phones are on silent? And when you're invited to speak, please do put your camera on if you so wish to. Everyone beforehand should have received a procedure for this meeting regarding the use of cameras and everything, and how to connect back in if you lose connection. And as connection might drop out, I might lose connection. I would just like to agree that between Councillor Blakeman and Councillor Schmetterling that I can nominate Councillor Schmetterling to be appointed as a substitute chair. Is that agreed, committee? Councillor Blakeman, is that agreed? Schmetterling agreed?
Agreed.
Fantastic.
Yeah, agreed.
Hopefully I won't lose connection, but you never know. So today the case before us is to vary the licence for Dirty Bones, 20 Kensington Church Street, London W8 4EP. And now for declarations of interest. I can declare I have no declaration of interest to make regarding this. Councillor Schmetterling, do you?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. I have no declaration of interest to make. I have no interest in this premises.
I have no declaration.
Fantastic. Thank you. For clarity, I'll very briefly outline the procedure. But again, this has been circulated before and the papers are online. First, the licensing officer, Sharon Dybel, will give a brief outline of the application. Sharon, please, can you confirm your attendance?
Good morning, Chair. Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I will ask the applicant's legal advisor, Mr. Thomas O'Malin, to present his submission, and you'll have it up to a maximum of 10 minutes. Please, can I ask you to confirm your attendance?
Yes, Councillor, I confirm my attendance.
Fantastic, thank you. And then after the applicant has presented his case, the members of the committee will ask questions to the applicant, and at this time also the objectors can ask questions, and so can the noise and nuisance officer. Next, the noise and nuisance officer, Mr. Mahaffey, will present his objection as the responsible authority. Mr. Mahaffey, are you there? Can you confirm your attendance, please?
Yes, madam, I'm here.
Fantastic, thank you. And then likewise, the committee and the objectors and the applicant will all have the chance to ask questions. And then next, the objectors will be able to present their submissions for up to a maximum of 10 minutes each. Today we have two objectors wishing to speak, Mr. De La Marina and Mr. John Cookson. Mr. De La Marina, can you please confirm your attendance?
Yes, I am here, thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. And Mr. Cookson, can you confirm your attendance?
Yes, I'm here.
Fantastic, thank you. And likewise, the members of the committee and the applicant and Mr. Mahaffey can ask you questions as well. And then after this, we'll ask our legal officer, Ms. Lemazurier, to deal with any questions she may have, for example, regarding some of the conditions. And then finally, we'll turn to the governance team with Isabel to see if any issues have been raised in the chat box or other issues we need to consider. And there will be no summing up and the meeting will end. Just before we start, I just want to draw everyone's attention to an email from Councillor Robert Freeman that was sent round answering the applicant's response to the papers. Mr. O'Malley, can I confirm that you have had a chance to read that? If not, would you like a few minutes now to read it? The document's on the screen right now.
Councillor, I have had an opportunity and I have read it. Thank you very much.
You have read it?
I have indeed. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. So in that case, committee, you're okay to commence? Councillor Bateman, Schmetling?
Yes.
Right, yes.
Fantastic. Then in that case, we'll get going. I'm going to turn my camera off, and Ms. Dybel is now going to outline the case for us. Thank you.
Good morning. This application is made by Rock E Limited for the variation of the premises licence for Dirty Bones, 20 Kensington Church Street, London W8 4EP. The application has been amended since the agenda papers were circulated, and the applicant is now seeking to vary the licence as follows. To extend the permitted hours for live and recorded music, performance of dance, entertainment similar to music or dance, the sale of alcohol on the premises, and late night refreshment indoors on Thursday nights until 1 AM the following day, and on Friday and Saturday nights until 2 AM the following day, for a time-limited period of 1 year, starting today and ending on the 24th of June 2021. The applicant is also seeking to add off sales of alcohol in sealed containers, ancillary to takeaway meals delivered by courier from 10 AM until midnight Monday to Friday, 11 AM until midnight on Saturday, and midday until midnight on Sunday. Existing condition 21, which currently states that there shall be no off sales of alcohol, would need to be amended to reflect this. The original proposal to remove condition 19 on the premises licence and extend the hours on Sunday to Thursday night until 2 AM and 3 AM on Friday and Saturday nights has been withdrawn. Details of these amendments are set out in the applicant's submission statement, which is currently on your screen, and this was circulated to all parties as an additional document on the 18th of June. It also includes a proposal to add 8 further conditions, which can be found on pages 7 and 8 of the submission statement. Madam, the current permitted hours are summarised in the main body of the report on pages 1 and 2, and a copy of the existing licence is included at Appendix A, and that can be found on pages 8 to 14 of the main body of the report. The application has attracted objections from Keith Mahaffey on behalf of the Council's Noise and Nuisance team on the grounds of public nuisance, and 10 representations opposing the application from other parties, including one from Councillor Robert Freeman and 2 from local residents groups. That would be the Hillgate Village Residents Association and Old Court Kensington Management Limited. The grounds for objection are essentially public nuisance, crime and disorder, and public safety, and a summary of the representations can be found on pages 4 to 6 of the agenda papers. Copies of the representations are included at appendices C and D, which run from pages 30 to 45. Details of the amendments to the application have been circulated to all parties, but this has not resulted in the withdrawal of any of the representations. The premises have utilised 12 of their 21-day annual allowance of temporary event notices in the past month for off sales of alcohol between 11 AM and 10 PM on each of the Thursday, Friday, Saturday and Sundays in June, and no complaints were received. Madam, that is the summary of the application. I'll leave it there for now unless there is anything else I can help you with at this stage.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So now we are going to go on to the applicant's case. Mr. Malin, please can you present your submission? You have up to 10 minutes, and please turn on your camera if you'd like. Thank you.
Hopefully you can all hear and see me. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor. The introduction by your officer has been extremely helpful, and you will have heard what we would suggest are substantial amendments that have been made to this application. But just to reiterate very briefly, and just for absolute clarity, what is now proposed is an extension of 1 hour on Thursdays, Fridays and Saturday evenings, and that if you were minded to grant the application, it would be for 1 year only. You've also heard the amendments made in relation to off sales, and that it would not and is not the intention to permit customers to drink alcohol as an off sale on the street, and in fact it would be limited to being ancillary to a delivery service with a meal. Further to the email that I received this morning from Councillor Freeman, there was a couple of points that I would like to take to the committee's attention. First of all, of course, the point is made by Councillor Freeman in relation to premises operating, or at least should not be operating, after midnight. You will, of course, readily appreciate that these premises already have the benefit of a licence, albeit on Fridays and Saturdays, to operate already until 1 o'clock in the morning. And if this application were granted, the Thursdays would mirror the hours currently permitted on the Fridays and Saturdays, rather. In terms of the off sales, you've already heard as well that we have been granted and were given permission under temporary event notices to provide off sales during the month of June, namely for the latter part of the week. I know you also heard that there have been no complaints received in relation to those specific off sales. But just to add a little bit of clarity and a little bit of meat on the bone, over the past month, I can confirm that in terms of off sales under the temporary event notices, the premises have been operating from midday until 10 o'clock at night, as you've heard, and the take-up of that has been approximately 2 deliveries per hour during the day and the evening. Those deliveries, in fact, are taken and have been taken by bicycle. However, we would be content, if you were minded to grant this aspect of the application, to agree to certain conditions, ensuring that if, for example, there were drivers that they turned their engines off, etc., and even that the numbers were limited, as has been suggested by some of the residents. In terms of the hour, I appreciate that Councillor Freeman suggests 10 o'clock. We, however, would like to continue with our proposal for midnight. The midnight is one that is reflected in your own policy, and in the policy itself, it suggests that midnight would ordinarily be granted and would be acceptable. And we would suggest that the limited amount of off sales that is being proposed, and in the manner that the off sales would take place, they would not give rise to public nuisance. Chair, if I could turn now to the substantive part of the application and in relation to the extension of the hours. As I've already stated, if you were minded to grant, this would only be for 1 year, in effect to test the water and to try to give some comfort to local residents. You will have noted in my submission there are already a number of conditions already contained within the premises licence, but we've also offered a series of extra conditions, not 8 in number, including a dispersal policy and conditions relating to the supervision of customers when they leave, staff training, recording any complaints, etc., ensuring that there is no public nuisance in terms of not only noise but also smells emanating from the premises, and that the premises would continue to operate as it does, insofar as substantial food would always remain available throughout the permitted hours. Madam, in terms of policy, it is noted in my submissions that I know you have read that the committee will primarily focus and of course the direct impact of the licensable activities. I would just stress, without going over again my written submissions, that these premises are in a basement. The ground floor of premises nearby, I understand, are entirely set over to either businesses or other licensed premises or retail units. We, of course, fully accept that there are residents on Kensington Church Street, and we accept that we have neighbours to the rear of us. But we would also suggest that the neighbours to our rear and also the neighbours further up the road on Sheffield Terrace, it would be difficult for them to be disturbed by what may be taking place, certainly inside a basement premises on the Kensington High Street end of Kensington Church Street, or indeed what takes place outside. Nevertheless, we recognise the fact that there have been representations made by those that reside on Church Street itself, and hence why we have put forward the extra conditions as outlined in my submissions. And also, in terms of the amendments to the application, that of course is intended not only for the residents on Kensington Church Street, but also the residents that live to the rear of the premises, and to those residents that reside further up on Sheffield Terrace, and of course, last but not least, to Mr. Mahaffey, who has raised certain concerns in relation to this application. Madam, unless I can assist you or members of the committee further at this stage, those are my submissions. I'm of course happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Malley. I'm going to now turn to my fellow committee members and see if we have any questions for you. So, Councillor Blakeman, would you like to ask any questions?
Yes, I've got 2 questions. Firstly, I have a concern about the queuing to get into the premises. Even if the social distancing is reduced to 1 metre, I'd like to know how it will be managed, because it's a very, very narrow pavement there, and indeed it's a very narrow road. And my second question relates to page 30 of the main bundle, where Mr. Mahaffey tells us that on the very last sentence of the penultimate paragraph, the applicant has confirmed that should this licence be granted, it shall only have effect until the 1st of September 2020. And I wondered whether, because the applicant has confirmed that to him, why the 2 applicants who were going to be present are not now present.
Thank you, Councillor Blakeman. Mr. Mellon, are you able to answer those? Thank you.
I am able to answer those, well, at least to the best of my ability, shall we say. In terms of queuing, the only times the premises currently or in the past have experienced queuing is when there has been a private pre-booked function and people are in effect being ticked off from a list as they enter the premises. In terms of social distancing, I can confirm that risk assessments are being drafted at the moment so as to ensure that not only matters such as queuing, but also the operation of the inside of the premises will not only adhere to the new social distancing regulations, but also ensure that, for example, hand sanitizing takes place and that there is a rota in terms of cleaning the premises and dealing with orders, etc. In relation to orders, they're already looking at having a online system via an app where customers will be able to order food and drinks from their tables so as to minimise contact with members of staff. In terms of the applicants, Mr. Panchal, in fact, was never going to attend the hearing this morning. It was only Mr. Koki. Unfortunately, he pulled out at the very last minute for two reasons. He is in rural Sussex, where his reception is very poor, and he is also at the moment in accommodation with his young daughter, and to attend a hearing was going to present him with great difficulties. So I spoke to him this morning and he asked me to proceed with the application by myself. I hope that answers your queries. Sorry, the final matter in relation to Mr. Mahaffey. I think we'll need to hear from Mr. Mahaffey. I'm not sure what is meant by the 1st of September, but for clarity from my side at least, if the committee were minded to grant the extension, the 1 hour extension for Thursday, Friday and Saturday would only be until the 24th of June 2021.
Yeah, well, I'll ask Mr. Mahaffey also about his presentation, unless he answers it when he presents. But you mentioned a risk assessment. Can you confirm that the risk assessment will be published on the website of Dirty Bones once it's agreed?
That wasn't our intention, but if you would like the risk assessment to be published on the website, we can certainly do so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blakeman. Any further questions? Or let's ask Councillor Schmetterling his questions first. We can always come back to you. Councillor Schmetterling?
At the moment, I've got one question, might come up with a second one, but the question is how, although health, let me just give an intro. Health directly is not a matter of licensing, of course, but there are options to look at aspects beyond immediate, alcohol sales and so on, if other legislation doesn't fully cover it in terms of risks. So we're wondering about enforcing social distancing both outside the premises, because as you know, the footway is very narrow, and inside. Now we know that the rules have been modified and it's now 1 meter plus, but the plus is obviously a certain measure. It's not just any old 1 meter. So how would that be dealt with? And this actually, the second question was, one of the objectors has said that he's had to report several complaints where he spoke to you or to the applicant, and we were wondering how these complaints were answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. First of all, in relation to the COVID-19 regulations, I accept what you're saying, that strictly speaking, health isn't necessarily a licensing objective. However, I do accept, and I think most responsible licensees would accept, that I think it could quite fairly, these regulations could quite fairly and squarely fall under public safety, which of course covers the very fact as to whether or not a licensed premises is safe for the public to be in. Now, ordinarily, that refers to matters akin to building regulations and fire safety and the like. But I see no reason why it could not include the regulations for COVID-19. In terms of controlling our customers under the current pandemic, and when we would hope to reopen, which for the record is currently the 4th of July, but that is a movable feast insofar as if we do not feel as operators we are ready, we will not be opening on that date. But as I say, there are risk assessments that are being undertaken. One of the considerations is to try to control customers by insisting that those attending pre-book online, thereby controlling the hour that customers will be arriving, in effect giving them a slot of time if they're coming in the earlier in the evening, in much the same way that most restaurants operate, of course. But as I say, this is a work in progress, and the premises themselves, along with most others, have been waiting for various government announcements. Now that those announcements have been made by the Prime Minister, of course, work is afoot so as to ensure the safety of the customers and, of course, staff, but also the compliance with the regulations themselves. I've forgotten what the other questions was now.
Dealing with complaints, particularly from Mr. Della Morena, because he said there were several times he had to complain.
There is, and to be frank, there is no excuse for that. In the submissions, an apology has been afforded again. Needless to say, it shouldn't have been necessary in the first place. But there is no point in us trying to pretend otherwise and trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. There was an issue which we clearly regret because this has serious implications for this premises moving forward. But my instructions certainly are that Mr. Della Morena was spoken with by the general manager, and that the issues that were experienced in relation to noise outbreak have been addressed. But as I've said, and as I've said in my submissions, the applicant is happy to continue that dialogue, but moreover to work directly with an acoustic engineer at their expense and at Mr. Della Morena's timings of his own choosing, to ensure that what was experienced by him in the past cannot happen again. Regardless of the outcome of this hearing, it is obviously extremely important that a resident who lives so close to this premises, that any issue that has been experienced is resolved to their satisfaction.
Yes, may I, Chair, may I just ask a couple of follow-ups on both of them?
Yes, a couple of follow-ups, because I'm aware that we are going to be hearing Mr. De La Marina's case and objections relatively soon, and I've got a couple of questions.
Indeed. So thank you very much, Mr. Mellon. So I think I'm clear about how you deal with the bunching of customers outside. It sounds that it should be manageable by the booking system you've indicated. But I'm just wondering, inside, if, I don't know whether you plan to limit the numbers. Of course, you can have up to, I think, 100 people in under the current arrangements. And whilst a restaurant facility can be dealt with, we know that, we've seen the government guidelines, how you arrange the tables, especially if it's over.
Can I just interrupt for a moment? Because yes. I feel that if we're going to go into the absolute precise details of the COVID guidance, we have to leave that up to the operator to provide their risk assessment. And as Councillor Blakeman has said, that they are, I think that is the way forward in terms of the COVID restrictions. But if you have anything specific to the application's request.
Well, I was concerned about having a lot of people inside. And the second thing is that Mr. Moreno said that there were several incidents of complaints over 2 years and not just one. Of course, we'll ask Mr. Della Moreno, but I just wondered, what Mr. O'Malley would say about that.
Firstly, and I hesitate when I say this, on the COVID-19 regulations, just to clarify, the capacity of the premises in the short term will be reduced, and I can confirm that all the regulations will be complied with, so that, for example, there won't be any vertical drinking at the bar. There will not be any area where customers may dance. It will be for diners and seated customers, etc. And as I say, we would expect the capacity to be halved in this premises in the short term. In terms of the complaints that were received from Mr. Della Marina, my understanding is that on each occasion action was taken, and that it was thought at the time that the matter had been resolved. Clearly, the matter had not been resolved to his satisfaction, hence the reoccurrence. Therefore, to repeat, in terms of my submissions, we are happy to give an undertaking to him to employ an acoustic engineer at our expense, and if an officer from the council wants to be involved, we're more than happy for that as well. But we are happy at our expense to ensure that if there is still an issue, and I appreciate we'll hear from Mr. Del Marina in a short while, but if there is, we will undertake to resolve that issue and go further, that any variation to the license shouldn't take effect until those concerns, if they still exist, of Mr. Della Marina have been addressed, and in effect those works have been signed off by one of your officers. We're happy to offer that as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that clarification. That's very important, because I think that is a very important issue, which I'm sure we'll hear more about when Mr. Della Marina presents his case. I have a couple of questions about the off sales, please. So I understand, as you said, they're going from midday to 10 p.m. and averaging 2 deliveries per hour. I'm glad to see you using bicycles. That's good. What are you proposing that this is temporary as well?
No, we are proposing that this is permanent. However, quite frankly, if the committee were concerned about having permanent, we would be content to have this on a trial period, or on a time-limited period of 1 year.
Okay, thank you for that. And the dispersal policy. So we've discussed the queuing, which sounds as if it seems to be mainly for pre-booked functions, which makes sense. The dispersal policy, can you explain us a little bit more about that? Because I don't think the conditions about the dispersal policy are robust enough. And I think that is a big issue for many residents in the area, people leaving. Thank you.
I think, in fairness, that is absolutely correct. And my understanding, having read the licence, that I don't think there is any condition relating to a specific dispersal policy. Hence why we are offering now to provide a written dispersal policy. You'll see in the penultimate page of my submissions, the proposed condition would be the premises should operate a dispersal policy and all staff shall be trained in its implementation. If it were to assist the committee and the residents, it could be added to that the dispersal policy, once completed, is approved by your officers, and a copy of the policy is sent to the local authority, and we'd also be happy to send a copy of that policy to the relevant residents associations. But at the moment, just to be absolutely clear, that policy, a written policy is not in place. The written policy has not been drafted as yet. Regardless of the outcome of this hearing, a written policy is going to be put in place on the back of what is clearly concerns by local residents. And as I say, that is regardless of whatever the outcome of this application may be. In terms of the dispersal policy at the moment, it's probably, well, I think evidentially it's too simple. It consists of staff at the entrance supervising customers as they leave, assisting them to get taxis, showing them, if need be, where night buses might be, or the underground if it is running at that time, where it may be. I think that a lot more meat on the bone could be added to it. I think that, for example, and I've seen this with other premises, an arrangement could be made with the likes of Uber, where customers are collected from Kensington High Street rather than Kensington Church Street, or perhaps closer to the church on the corner of Church Street and the High Street, so that it is away from local residents, and also trying to ensure that there is one specific area rather than people wandering and trying to pick up Ubers elsewhere or trying to pick up black cabs elsewhere. So as I say, I think there's quite a lot that can and should be done, and from experience, there are a number of licensed premises that you'll be familiar with that have quite robust dispersal policies, and one would hope that if we have one that is approved by your officers and is lodged with them and with the local residents, that they have something that they can rely upon as well. And so the ball would very much be in our court as operators to ensure that we comply with what it is that we set out within that policy.
Okay, that's very important. Thank you. And I think that's absolutely crucial for a responsible operator to be doing that. I noticed from the website, I'm not familiar with Dirty Bones, but I did look at the website, and I see it's quite kind of a food-led business. So I assume that's probably one of the reasons with COVID you're doing the off sales. And it says on the website that on Friday and Saturday night it has only over 21s. I'm not asking for this to be a condition, but it's a shame the applicant's not actually here, because I'd actually like to know a little bit more about how he operates, because I think this produces a picture for us who don't frequent the premises. Do you have any insight into that, Mr. O'Malley?
I do. Well, from personal experience, I've never eaten at this particular branch, but I have been to their branch in Soho, which is in Kingly Court of Carnaby Street. So, as you will have seen from their website, it is very much a food-led establishment. The Dirty Bones part of it originates from. They did a lot of spare ribs. The style of food is American. I was going to say the word junk food, but that would be mean. But it is chicken, it is burgers, it is steaks, it is ribs. But it is in fairness, it is very food led. It is very American in feel, in terms of even the drinks that they offer, in terms of the cocktails, etc., and the general ambience of the restaurant itself. The reason for, and I know the answer to this in terms of the over 21s policy, is simply they do not want to attract younger, well, frankly, teenagers coming into the premises. The style of the premises is the type of premises that might attract people who are younger. So if you imagine almost a scaled back version of Planet Hollywood or one of these types of establishments, where you might be more likely to attract 16, 17, 18-year-olds, that's fine as far as the operators are during the day. But obviously they appreciate that their license already is relatively late. So they want to attract a customer that is older. There obviously are conditions in relation to sales of alcohol and checking and ensuring that customers are over a certain age. And this just gives them an extra layer of comfort in terms of ensuring that their customers are of the correct age.
Okay, and I just have one more question, and I believe Councillor Schmetterling has one more question. The smoke too. Oh, you have. Great. Condition 20. I know we're not looking at all forms of conditions, but I just wondered if you have any comment about the smoking, because seeing we're talking about the street issue in terms of we've already covered the queuing, we've discussed the dispersal policy, which I think is absolutely essential, and then smoking obviously comes onto that. I know this is not one of the conditions we're looking at, but do you have any comments on condition 20, which says 10 people are allowed to smoke outside?
I don't, to be short. Certainly, I haven't seen any concerns raised in relation to smokers. It isn't something that I've specifically discussed with the applicants, and I think it'd probably be wrong of me to try to second guess as to that particular condition on the licence. My apologies for that. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Schmetterling, would you like to come back with a brief question, then Councillor Blakeman, and then I'm aware I know the objectors, I'm sure, probably want to ask some questions, as probably will Mr. Mahaffey.
Thanks very much. I guess the overall question is, if we are minded to agree to this, to the application, but still have some concerns, reflecting the residents' concerns, if we were minded, would you be accepting of, say, a 6-month extension for the temporary parts, for the limited aspects of the application?
In short, yes.
Thanks very much.
And my question is a follow-up about the dispersal policy. Once it's agreed, would it not be sensible to put it on the website so that people who are going to attend are aware of it in advance?
Likewise, we'd be more than happy to put the policy on the website.
Thank you, committee, very much. Now we are going to move to the objectors to ask questions. So, Mr. Cookson and Mr. De La Marina, this you will have a chance to put your submission in a minute, but this is just to ask specific questions to the applicant, if that's okay. So, Mr. De La Marina, would you like to ask any questions?
Yes, I will like to ask some questions. So, shall I start with the questions?
Yes.
So for instance, like they talk about a training to be provided, but what sort of training is this, and why has that training not been provided already to the staff that are already at the premises? Also, that's one question. The other question is, they say they intend to have 10 people outside smoking with 1 meter plus. That means that probably is going to be from number 24. They are on number 20. They're going to be in number 24 to number 12 at least. That it's a very long line of people to be smoking outside if you're going to allow 10 people to be smoking on a 1 meter plus. Also, another question is in terms of what is they have at the moment. Is that they have a fan outside that is causing a lot of disturbance. That we've talked to the managers and nothing has been done about it. When they extend the license in order to provide food for later, are they planning to continue having this fan? Is this fan going to be working into the late hours? Because at the moment there is a new building being constructed, and I know that they're causing an issue with at the back. With regards to the risk assessment that be carried out, is this going to be carried out by an independent company, or who's going to be carried this risk assessment? And then what? I have one more, but I can't read my handwriting.
That's okay. We can come back. We'll come back to your final question.
I don't know what I wrote here.
Don't worry. We'll come back to your final question.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mailer, would you please answer that? So we've got training, smoking, fan, and the risk assessment. Thank you.
So on the training, there is training at the moment. There is staff inductions that take place at the premises. What's been suggested now is something more robust, though, something that courses that are arranged by there's an association called the British Institute of Innkeepers that run courses specifically tailored for the licensed trade. Now, the intention is that we would have more of our managers to go on what's called the personal licensing course and to obtain their personal license. And if you're not familiar with that, it's almost like applying for a driving license. So it involves going on a one-day course, etc. In terms of general staff, it is intended that there would be training on site, not only for this premises, but also for the group at large, and that training would be undertaken by suitably qualified trainers from the British Institute of Innkeepers. So, as I say, we just with an extra level of training that doesn't happen. In fact, in fairness, doesn't happen in most premises across London. In terms of smoking, you're absolutely right that clearly that under the current COVID-19 regulations and with social distancing, to permit 10 customers outside is not an option. On reading the condition, which is on the license, my view has always been that it is a reference to customers being allowed immediately outside the premises. So if we look at it, it says a maximum, which is important, a maximum of 10 patrons shall be allowed to smoke on the pavement immediately outside the premises. So with social distancing, clearly in the short term, that number would have to be reduced in order to permit that. It would not be permissible under the current conditions on the license to allow customers to smoke in the outside the premises next door, for example. In relation to the fan, I'm afraid I don't have that information to hand, but it is certainly something that I can obtain for you, and I can ensure the details are sent to you today, regardless of the outcome of this hearing. And finally, I have a note saying risk assessment. I'm not sure what my scribble means. So
that was,
tell me what the other.
Would it be an independent risk assessment, or would it?
Yes. So the it's not an independent risk assessment. The group, which for clarity, they operate 5 premises. They have a health and safety officer, and that officer is suitably qualified as one would expect, and that officer is drafting a risk assessment, not only for these premises but also for their other premises, and has been agreed earlier. We're happy to publish that risk assessment on the website when it is completed.
Thank you very much, Mr. De La Marina. Do you have your final question, or any other questions you'd like to ask?
Yes, the question I had was, so in the last year, more or less, when I have spoken to the management about the noise traveling through the structure of the building, because they close at a time where usually Friday and Saturday I make the point not to be at the flat, or I haven't really been double checking that the noise has been the same. But I just wanted to know, do they have, what is it that has been done in order to correct that noise? And also, have they stopped, because I understand there's an indoor patio where the fan comes. Have they got something in the policy not to allow people to smoke and talk there? Because that's where the noise travels, and I've expressed that to them, and I don't know whether there's something in writing that they're having so that doesn't happen anymore.
It's correct to say that staff that had historically been using that area you talk of are not permitted to do so, and haven't been permitted to use that space for some time. In relation to, oh, my mind's gone blank now. Sorry, what was the other question?
So basically what happens is that the separation between Dirty Bones and our building is there's some stairs, but actually our first bedroom and the rest of the bedrooms are basically on the same wall. So therefore, whenever there's noise, the noise travels through the structure of the building, and I explained that to them, and they said they will correct it, but I don't know whether they've done anything about it. I know that before we had to go into isolation, I went there a couple of times, like about 7 in the afternoon, 7 in the evening or 6 in the evening, and obviously there's not a lot of noise, but I've never been right at the end of the night when it's like midnight or something like that to double.
Okay, well, I am able to confirm that noise limiters have been fixed on the sound system, which seems a fairly obvious and quick fix to the issue. But to reiterate, the applicant would be more than happy to ensure that, and obviously there's been a period when, for extraneous reasons, that the premises haven't been trading, that before we do so, that we employ an acoustic engineer to ensure that when music is played at these premises, that they do not cause a disturbance to yourself moving forward. But my understanding, at least, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that it was corrected, albeit, which I accept, after there were a couple of complaints, but it was corrected and the noise limiters had been fixed. However, as a belt and braces, we would offer that that we will have an acoustic engineer to come down to ensure that everything is entirely to your satisfaction.
Thank you for that, Mr. Marino. We've just got the plan up on the screen right now, and you talk about an internal courtyard. I wonder if you could help us show us where that is on the layout, because I think this is something that's very important, and perhaps we could discuss this a bit further.
I mean, I'm looking at the plan. I know. So I think it might be behind the toilet. So I don't like. So can you see this? It says light well or lit well? Or no, like there where your hand is, either there or a little bit back. I think is. Can you see the kitchen?
Yeah. Yeah.
There has to be. So there's a fan that goes directly where the kitchen is, all the way up. The fan is extremely loud, and there is. I don't know, like from where I see it from my flat, is everything is one floor, one surface, and then there is a courtyard. I don't know if the courtyard goes all the way down to them or stops at some point. I can I could take pictures, but I'm not sure exactly where do they link. But in the past, they have, unless it's this here, they told us they could actually smoke. Because
okay. Okay, thank you for that. Again, this is why it's really useful to have the applicant here at hearings. So, Mr. O'Malley, if we were minded to grant your requests, would you think about some condition concerning this light well? If for staff smoking and noise or customers?
Most certainly. I can confirm to the residents and to the committee that this area, which I accept had been used historically, is no longer used under any circumstances by the staff, and we'd be more than happy for that to be conditioned on the licence.
Thank you. And regarding the fan, I'm sure that Mr. Mahaffey will enlighten us further about that, because there are various conditions regarding noise emitting from fans and odours. So we'll come on to him in a minute. And of course, Mr. Mahaffey will have a chance to ask some questions in a moment. Mr. De La Marina, any further questions before we move on to Mr. Cookston?
No, thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Cookston, would you like to ask any questions to the applicant?
Yes, good morning to all of you. Just a couple of quick observations first. First of all, I'm very upset that the applicant hasn't participated in these proceedings. They may be out in the country, but I don't believe that they don't have access to a phone, because they could have taken part by phone today. And secondly, what I heard about shoving dozens of inebriated people into Kensington High Street at 2 in the morning just fills me with horror. And really confirms all our fears at Allcourt House of what's actually developing here at Dirty Bones. But my question is this, Mr. O'Malley, you say you're testing the water. What do you mean by that? Is the plan to go on till 3 in the morning, perhaps?
Mr. Cookson, would you like just to, would you like to just say your other questions, then you can take them all and answer them all in a go?
That's my only question for now.
Okay, fantastic.
He said he's testing the water. What's the idea? To squeeze the residents a bit and see if we flinch, or what's the plan?
No, not at all. The idea is that that if the committee were minded to grant the 1 hour extension, that it would be limited to either 6 months or to a year. And there is no. What would happen after 6 months and a year? Are you closing down or extending? No. Because that would be time limited. We would then need to reapply for that extension. So it would be up to the operator to apply for another variation.
They could ask for 3 o'clock in the morning again, right?
They could ask for 3 o'clock in the morning again. However, I suspect it is highly unlikely that either they would apply for 3 o'clock in the morning, or that 3 o'clock in the morning would be even entertained by the council. That is the very reason why the application has been amended in the way that it has, because it became very clear early on that what had originally been proposed was completely unacceptable to not only yourselves and to those that you represent, but also to the Environmental Health Officer.
One quick question. Have you visited Old Court Place or attended this club yourself?
I've attended the premises, but only during the daytime. I'm familiar with Old Court Place and Kensington High Street, and I was in the past a resident in Kensington Chancery, so I'm very familiar with the area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cookson. Mr. Mahaffey, hello. Would you like to ask the applicant any questions? And of course, you will have time to do your submission later. So just questions, please. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, I think I feel a bit superfluous here because all my questions have been answered. So I think we can move on.
Never superfluous. But we look forward to hearing your submission soon. Thank you very much for all those questions. Now we're going to go to the objectors. So you have now up to 10 minutes to do your submission. Mr. De La Marina, are you okay to start first?
Yeah. Oops, sorry. Yes, I am. I can start with So I mean, my concerns about extending the license is that, well, the premises. Historically, I've been living there for a long time, and historically, those premises, even though they say that they changed the noise so that the music doesn't get louder, it travels to the structure of the building, and they have always caused a real, basically, they keeps us awake until midnight or 1 o'clock. It was kind of manageable on a Friday or Saturday. So even though it's woken me up times that I've gone to bed, and I actually spoken to the managers about it, I cannot try to ignore it in the past. When it moves to 2 o'clock in the morning, it's just going to be unbearable, because I cannot be, making myself not go to bed until that late every Friday and Saturday. There is a number of things in the premises that are already not working, and it really changes depending on, how busy it gets, how popular it gets. Dirty Bones so far they've been quite good at hearing what we say. In the past, some of the people in the premises, they didn't want to even hear about the noise, but I haven't seen any changes happening. So what I have done personally is trying to ignore it so it doesn't become an issue in my life. But I haven't really seen major differences between, like the problems that I experienced before and after they made the changes. At the same time, it's been quite a long time since the business has been off. Since it's been since March. So I don't really see. I remember I've been going to the premises during February, and I was actually becoming more and more friendly with them, so we could work together, because I understand in the past there is no point in fighting with your neighbor. It's better to actually try to do things together. But obviously, I visited for about a month 3 times, and they were very kind to us. But then this virus isolation started, and I have not heard anything, because the premises have not been having loud music. We do have a problem with the ventilation, the fan ventilation at the back. This will become, when the building at the back of our flats are finished, part of the Lanza Square are finished, they will have a big problem, because I've noticed the grease. Basically, the builders have had to create a plastic shield to stop the grease covering all the new flats, and they have a plastic. They have something for security, so the builders don't fall. The heat of the fan has melted 4 times now, because I regularly go outside to my terrace, and I was spoken to the builders, and they say yes, the heat is so strong that coming from the fan that is melting this container, this shield. So that's a big problem. I mean, but obviously it only affects me at night because of the noise and not the smell. Like for instance, last night was so hot, I slept with all the windows open. I even the door open to my terrace. I could hear the fan, but then it wasn't too. I tried to ignore it, but I could also smell the kitchen food around 9 p.m. I do understand 9 p.m. is a very early time to go to sleep, but still, if it's extended much later, it would obviously affect us. I'm really concerned about the smoking at the entrance, because in the past it's not just about allowing people to smoke. I do understand that they say that the culture of Dirty Bones is a foodie place, but actually I would say it's more a cocktail place than a food place. People go there to drink cocktails, and then you might have some food to go with it. At least that's the one in Street. Most people are actually, taking drinks, which means when you extend the license to an extra hour, people, the customers in general, in the past, what they tend to do is that they urinate at entrance, they leave glasses. So this will start happening every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, which is just a nuisance. And I don't know how they're going to manage it, because it's something that the staff sometimes don't realize, which is people leave the premises with a glass hidden in their clothes, and then they urinate and they leave the empty glass by that door. Also, I mean, in terms of collecting objection, as long as it's not, I think they're providing a service, and I think it's good. But it is a little bit intimidating when the customers are there, when the whole of the street is blocked with customers smoking or queuing to go inside, or both in some occasions. I think that's basically all the points I wanted to make. I really wish we could all cohabit in a way that they can make as much money and continue providing the service, and we can live in, all of us in harmony. But I'm really concerned about extending the time, because what tends to happen is, the time all reported is like being noisy and they're having issues. For them to also extend it, it means that, and they haven't even really proven that they've fixed the problem that they have. So for them to extend the license means that they're going to go into an area into a time where it's just going to be real. Basically, it's going to have to be me monitoring that and writing it down, that and it's really having to call Newson, like the after hours service, for them to come and monitor the noise that they're creating, instead of like dealing with them directly. And also it's a little bit confrontational with a neighbor has to call us, go downstairs and say, look, you're really loud today, can you just try to reduce the noise? And so I'm really worried about this extension of the license, and also what that's going to affect in terms of the fan and then on the smells outside. That's, I think, everything I needed to say.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marina. I think it sounds as if you really understand, and you've been trying to kind of work with them. So it'd be interesting to ask a few extra questions about that. But before we do, I'd like to just ask Mr. Cookston, and then maybe we'll just collectively ask you both specific questions, if that's okay. So Mr. Cookston, are you ready to do your submission?
Yeah, sure. Can I just explain where Old Court House is? Because if you listen to Mr. O'Malley, you get the impression that we're miles away from these premises. As the crow flies, we're not at all. Old Court House, the front of the building faces Kensington High Street, and you may know Zara, the shop, or one of the shops downstairs. The west elevation, though, it runs parallel to Kensington Church Street, and at its nearest point is between, 50 to 100 yards from the back of these premises, Dirty Bones. And soon it was going to be, but for COVID, open in the end of the year as a sheltered housing development for at least 50 elderly. residents, and they will also be living in Old Court House, in Old Court Place, which is even closer to the rear of Dirty Bones. So we're in a sensitive area for this particular club, and we totally oppose any variation to the terms of the license. And I'm formally asking you at this point to reject it. On what grounds? Well, there are two grounds really, relating to prevention of crime and disorder and prevention of public nuisance. We have very long memories, and 8 years ago this club was known as Club 20, and residents were extremely exposed to the vagaries of this particular place. It was described by a newspaper as a hellhole, and it truly was. It was a magnet for drug dealing and prostitution, underage drinking, and that too had a license until 2 in the morning. And 2 in the morning doesn't mean they shut at 2 in the morning. It means that people are hanging around for at least an hour after that. And on those grounds alone, I would say that the licensing hours should be stay as they are, because the possibility of public nuisance of an extension to hours is absolutely huge. Just to give a snapshot of what it was like when Club 20 was open, Rose Kedwood.
Mr. Cookson, I'm really sorry, but we're dealing with a different operator here. So we can't go back to a different incarnation of the site.
Okay.
I can understand. So if you could keep it to relevant to the applicant's request,
sure,
as they stand now, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Yes, sure. I only mention it because at the end of the hearing about Club 20, we were given a pledge by councillors on the licensing committee that restrictions would remain in place, the ones that they were imposing back then in 2012, to ensure that residents never were exposed to this kind of antisocial behaviour ever again. And that's the reason why I'm mentioning Club 20 here. Because there's no question in our minds, having had that previous experience, that any extension of ours will lead to more bad behaviour and attract undesirables, if you like, to the neighbourhood. And I mentioned we're in Old Court Place. Old Court Place is the nearest road, the nearest parking place, if you like, to Dirty Bones. It's where people park their cars. It's where they spill out at present, even at night, after midnight, smoking, car doors slamming, people shouting, and all that kind of thing. So any extension of ours will lead to an exacerbation of those things that make our life miserable, really. And I would remind councillors, maybe you don't need reminding of this, but we do have a right to quiet enjoyment of our homes, and that's enshrined in English law. When you're considering applications such as this, your primary concern has to be for the quality of life of the residents, and that surely must take a primary role here. In other words, the demands of somewhere like Dirty Bones must surely be trumped by our own right to a peaceful life. So we are very worried indeed by any extension to the licensing hours for this particular club, based on historic evidence that we saw when it was known as another club. I'm sure that it's going to happen again, or at least we're convinced that it will. And on those grounds, we ask you to reject this application to vary the licensing hours for this particular club.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cookson. So, committee, Councillor Schmetling and Councillor Blakeman, would either of you like to ask questions to Mr. De La Marina or Mr. Cookson, please? Councillor Blakeman, would you like to go first?
Yes, can I just ask how much of the two objections relate to the current operation by the current operator, as opposed to what happened in the past?
So perhaps, Mr. De La Marina, would you like to answer that?
For me, I've lived here. I experienced what Mr. Coxon was saying, but I only objecting to the current situation. I have not. I mean, I understand a completely different business since I've been there. These premises have been under 6 or 7, like at least 5 different companies, and we have a lot of trouble. And the my view is only with what is happening with Dirty Bones, and I'm really concerned that if you extend it, we're gonna enter the same issue that we have in the past, because I think there is already a bit of an issue in there. So it's not like there's no issue whatsoever. So therefore, extending the license will just like try and see how it goes. No, there is already a problem with the license, with the music at the time that they have. So by extending it, it's only gonna it's gonna make it even more deep. It's gonna be even worse. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I'm totally talking about the existing license and the existing company managing the Dirty Bones. Nothing to do with it.
Okay, that's very clear. Thank you.
Yeah, I can certainly sympathise with the noise of the fan, but Mr. O'Malley's submission says that that the noise issue has been resolved. So I wondered why he put that in if it hasn't been resolved.
Well, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, nobody knows this, because since I expressed this last year, and then I went on holiday. I went away for a month, and then I went back in February after quite loud. And then I started to, little by little, going back and trying to befriend them. And then as soon as we had these conversations with the lady who's managing, which I can't remember her name right now, so I have in a diary at home, then Corona started. So I don't think that anybody can tell that it has been resolved, because there's not been enough, basically, since I started the conversations with them about the noise.
Della Marina, sorry, we're losing you a little bit, but I think my understanding is that you've started the conversation, but then COVID hit, so you're not quite sure if the action has happened. So I think we need to probably follow that up.
Exactly.
Further.
That's exactly what I'm trying to say. Nobody can tell whether the noise has been resolved or not, because I have not been able to experience any loud evenings due to the fact that it's been closed.
Okay, so I think this probably is a question we need to bring Mr. O'Malley back into in a minute. We'll come back to you, but Mr. O'Malley, if there's any way you can find out.
Can we also follow up the question of the fan? Because, I mean, from my own experience, I know fans can be very irritating.
Yes, I think we need to find out a couple of questions from the applicant. If you can contact him while we're on this committee here, it would be very helpful to find out what specific actions has happened around the fan, and not just around this. You've obviously talked about the sound on the actual music thing, but what about in terms of installation and all of that? If you could find out what that is, that would be great. And before we come back to that, Councillor Smetling, do you have any questions to actually ask the objectors, please?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much. I suppose it's addressed to both, although I'm also going to deal with one or two points made specifically by Mr. Della Morena. I've heard, of course, both your objections and your great concerns about this. Nevertheless, I'd like to ask explicitly a couple of things, but first also to say I understand the fan issue and the noise traveling through the building. This is, of course, a hard thing to deal with, but it has to be dealt with. Mr. Della Morena, you also mentioned that you complained several times in your submission, and I just wondered how they reacted to you. But you've heard the applicant's assurances of the measures that they propose to take. And I appreciate that you don't necessarily have a lot of confidence in this because of past history, but part of the problems were from a previous operator, and therefore, as I think the chair said, doesn't have a lot of bearing or no bearing on the present. Now, they've said they will put in as a condition certain things, and also regarding people collecting outside, clearly, and Mr. O'Malley has clearly stated under the COVID situation. They couldn't in any case reach their 10 maximum outside. It would be impossible because then it would not be in the vicinity of the premises. And you know, they've given undertakings, and on this occasion a number of them would be conditions of the policy. Yes, just allow me to,
Right.
please, just allow me to finish that. And sorry, so the question is, having heard all that, and the difference is at this time, some of the undertakings at least would be part of the condition for the license, as Mr. O'Malley has clearly said. And he's also said he'd be willing to look at a 6-month extension. So therefore, I'd like to ask both of the objectors, in the light of this, whether they think it's not as bad as they think it might be.
So if I'm answered maybe before, for me it is bad because so the way I manage noise in where I own my property in Kensington is if the noise is going to end up at 1, I know that, you know, I make myself busy. The problem is if he ends up at 2, it's just very unmanageable to go to sleep every Friday and Saturday so late. So what I have done in the past is if I've gone to bed and it's loud, I just get up again, watch some TV, read in the lounge. I don't mind. I'm aware of what has happened in the past, but I am taking one of the reasons why I really love these when Dirty Ones took on is because I thought they were not a club, so therefore there would ever be loud music or live music. When I hear that and I've experienced loud music in the past. The way I have been complaining is not on the day, because on the day, if I go downstairs, I need to get dressed, go downstairs, let them know. First of all, I'm already awake, and then I find in the past, I suffered of insomnia because of all of these situations. So I manage myself by being very calm, writing it down. The following day, I go and speak to them, try to speak to the manager. Sometimes when I go to speak to the manager starts a bit later. So it becomes an issue that is manageable because it's going to stop at 1 no matter what in the following days. Do you know what I mean? Now, if you extend the license when this problem is not resolved, means that I am already going to have to be prepared to like check the loudness. Because what happens with these licenses, with the license, is that even though I am sure they're trying to do the best, these buildings are really old and the music travels through the structure. I've been told that many times by many experts, and it's almost impossible to stop the noise or the vibration. So therefore, extending an extra hour means that it's just not stopping the license at a manageable time. It means that it's just in the middle of the night, which means I need to start taking notes. I need to start getting and then call the late out of hour service so they can come and experience it themselves, because you know, it's very disrupting for the neighbor to come down like at 1 o'clock and say, hey guys, you're really loud today. And the guy's trying to do the best that they can. But, you know, sometimes it's just a question of they're trying to do the best, but it's not good enough.
No, I understand, Mr. Bruno. And I think from your submission, you've really tried to engage and I can see, you know, you've been there since 1999 and you're aware of the differences between this operator and the previous operators. So let's see if we can get some answers about this specific issue.
Could I just ask if there's evidence for the urination? You've said if it comes from that. Do you know? You said urination in the doorway, which does happen. Do you know if it's from those premises, people from those premises?
I mean, the only business actually have people outside is them. One would. I mean, usually it happens when there is a party and there's a lot of them. A lot like leaving the premises. You know, sometimes you can hear like, people leaving, and then the day after there's 2 glasses and there's like urinated. You know, this doesn't happen so much anymore. In fact, it's very rarely happens. But before we had vomit. Like you could the worst thing is that you get up in the morning to walk the dog or something, and then there's someone has vomited and it's like vomit all of the entrance. That has not happened since these people have been operating that premise. So therefore, I have never mentioned it. But urinating, yes, I have seen it.
Thank you.
I not 100% say it comes from them, but it tends to be when there is a big group that leaves at the same time, really quite late, when those things happen, you know, when you get up in the morning and then it's classes.
Yes.
And then
No, I understand. The dispersal policy, no matter what happens with the hours, needs to be firmed up. And I think Mr. Mailhan has agreed to that. I've just got one question, if I may, to Mr. Cookson. And also, actually, I suppose also Mr. Marino again, talking about, because there's two separate aspects to this. There's an extension request for the hours in general, 1 hour in general from Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. And then there's also the off-sales request. Let's start with you, Mr. De La Marina. Do you have an objection to the specific off-sales? I mean, obviously they can already do takeaway food and takeaway things, takeaway food, but this would be adding alcohol to the takeaway. It would not be separate. It wouldn't be separate.
I don't have an objection to the off-sales, as long as obviously they don't start drinking in the street. When it's operated for the bikes come, collect the food and deliver it to the customers, I don't have a problem with that. No.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cookson. Mr. Cookson, are you able to unmute?
Sorry about that. Only in the sense that this is, you know, we're looking at the thin end of the wedge here. They say they don't operate as a nightclub, but it's a nightclub by stealth here, and this is what's actually going on. So, you know, this off-sales thing is just all part of the upgrading of the operation there. Look, those premises are just not suitable for the kind of operation that's going on there. The pavement outside, you can hardly get two people on it, and we keep hearing about a basement. In fact, it's not. It is a basement at the front, facing Kensington Church Street, but the ground falls away behind. So it's not a basement at the back. And, you know, people in Old Court House do hear noise already.
Specifically for the off-sales, wouldn't affect the back. So we're talking about the off-sales at the front.
Well, I suppose a kind of muted objection to that, only insofar as it's part of the big picture that, you know, I can see causing a problem down the line.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just... Sorry, am I on? I can't see. Right. May I just ask Mr. Cookson, they did set the key aspects of this are to be limited. It is essentially a trial, if you like, and it is, I think, also dealing with the economic, but that's another matter, but it's a trial in a sense. So it is an automatic expiry after a year is requested, but Mr. O'Malley has agreed to a 6-month period. It's automatic expiry, and they have to go through the application process again. I mean, is that not some comfort to you?
What's going to change between now and then? We're going to potentially suffer. I really feel sorry for Mr. Telemira. It's a horror story. I mean, we're only going to suffer during that period, and what's going to happen at the end of it? There's no point. There's no point to a limited time.
Okay. I'm just thinking in terms, also in the light of the assurances on some of the issues that.
Well, they'll tell you anything you want to hear. I mean, you know, they pay expensive lawyers to, and this particular solicitor, Mr. O'Malley, is renowned in London for this. I mean, they'll tell you anything you want to hear. But we've had experience of nightclubs here in Kensington over the years, and it's all very much familiar territory. And I would say, don't believe everything you hear.
Thank you, Mr. Cookson. I think Councillor Smattering is just probably trying to say, see what happens in 6 months, and if none of these promises that they say they're going to do comes to fruition, then we'll completely know, because it's hard to compare the previous, Club 20 with the current operator. And as Councillor Smattering alluded to, we're in a position seeing so many of our business premises not surviving COVID at all.
Yes, but what's more important? The council taxpayers, the residents of Kensington, or some club owner who lives in Kent or Sussex?
It's not a question of importance. It's a question.
It is important. You're putting their interest.
Can I just finish?
Their interests above ours.
We, Mr. Cookson, all that we fully take into account all the licensing objectives, and we also look at something that's proportionate and reasonable and fair, and we take into balance.
Yes, but it should be skewed in favour of the residents, and you know that.
So now we're going to go on to Mr. Mahaffey. Would you like to ask any questions to the objectors, please?
Madam Chairman, I don't think there's any need, because I think it's better if I just go and give my presentation.
Okay.
Okay.
Just before we do that, we're going to ask the applicant, Mr. Amalhan, if you'd like to ask any questions to the objectors. Sorry, Mr. Mahaffey.
Okay.
Still got some questions from the applicants to the objectors, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have no questions for either of the residents. Thank you very much, Madam.
Fantastic. Thank you. So now, Ms. Mahaffey, would you like to please present your case? Thank you.
Right. Madam Chairman, am I in? Oh, yes, I am. Madam Chairman, I met Mr. De La Morena many years ago. He was having an extremely bad time with premises called Club 20. There was also a premises before that called Punana in the building, and I'm sure Councillor Blakeman will remember that one as well. The premises caused major problems with the sound transmission up along the party walls to Mr. De La Morena's flat. It was untenable. It was one of the worst situations I ever came across with regard to sound transmission from a premises. Now, we had consultants in, they looked at the premises, they did tweak it, but it was only as good as the owners and operators' intention to maintain it. And the problem went on for years. We eventually got a situation there which was a kind of a compromise. But when the premises license was removed in 2012, the new license was granted, and it was granted specifically to prevent problems which Mr. De La Morena experienced. Now, it's not just the noise from the premises, that's a technical fix. You can go in, you can get a consultant in, they can look at the sound system, they can look at the performance of the building, and they can come up with a scheme of works which will encapsulate the sound within the premises. And clearly it depends on how loud the sound is that they want to generate. They have a dance floor. The dance floor used to be right next to the party wall. I'm pleased to see that it has now been moved over to the centre of the building at the front. But again, it's very much a case of maintaining that and having something which is adequate for the operation of the business. Now, the other problem was not just the sound transmission from the building, it was the noise from people queuing up, going in, and people leaving at the end of the evening. The problem is that Kensington Church Street is a highly reverberant environment. Sound reflects round. We've got residents which have bedrooms overlooking the street. It's not just Mr. De La Morena's flat that is affected by it. There's properties across the way which I've been in, and people's bedrooms are on the street. You only have to have one person outside making noise, and hey presto, that resident can't sleep. And as Mr. De La Morena says, he can't really sleep until such times as the premises closes in the evening. Well, that's not acceptable, because the average person in Kensington sleeps between the hours of 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. And clearly, to have this sort of environment for Mr. De La Morena is not what I would call acceptable. Clearly, there are a lot of things here that are outside the control of the operator. It's how people queue outside. You can't expect people to be quiet at all times. My view is that clearly extending the hours of operation of the premises is going to extend the disturbance and nuisance to both Mr. De La Morena and his neighbours. And clearly there'll be people outside queuing later, people dispersing later, there'll be music played later, and the potential for disturbance there. Now, I am concerned that he has to ring up the premises and say to the premises, turn your music down, because the sound limiting device should be set and should be maintained in such a way that we shouldn't have to do this. It's continuing, and clearly it does give me grave concerns. There's no point in extending a license if it's all it's going to do is create the circumstances for those disturbances to be experienced later in the morning. I therefore consider this at the moment the premises is not appropriate. It's not a premises that I would consider to have a 2 a.m. license. The Dirty Bones and Club 20, Punana, all they did was create severe nuisance to residents by having a 2 a.m. license. And clearly a 2 a.m. license is not, in my opinion, appropriate here. Also, as far as the off sales are concerned, I don't have a particular problem with off sales till 11 o'clock in the evening. After 11, I don't see why there should be, because I feel that after 11, basically residents are trying to sleep. People coming and going to the premises will have that effect. I also think that they have to manage it, and any off sales they have with the premises, I would say after 10 o'clock in the evening, should be with substantial food. That's all I have to say, Madam.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mahaffey. That was very comprehensive. Sorry, just turning my camera back on. So committee, Councillor Blakeman, would you have any questions for Ms. Mahaffey?
Yeah, I mean, I recollect the olden days for those premises. I think I sat on the hearing in 2012. But I wanted to ask Mr. Mahaffey that you mentioned that the applicant has confirmed that should this licence be granted, it shall only have effect until the 1st of September 2020. And the applicant is not here to either disabuse us of that or to confirm it. And I just wonder why it was in your submission, if it's not correct.
Sorry, in my submission?
Page 30,
yes.
The last sentence before the final paragraph.
Goodness.
It's on the screen, Mr. Mahaffey.
Right. The applicants from the right. Okay, but I still, sorry, madam, I must have missed that. Sorry, I missed that when I was looking at the application. I thought this was a permanent license, but the 1st of September 1990 is not that far away. But again, no off sales hours of premises Friday to Saturday to 2200. Is this for this? I thought the application.
It's just the last sentence of that paragraph. It's confusing.
Shall only have effect until the 1st of September 2020.
Yeah, I wonder where that come from and why it was put in there.
I hate to cut across, but I might be able to assist. I suspect it's a typographical error, because the proposal of the applicant is for an extension for 12 months, which would be until the 24th of June 2021. So I suspect that the Keith has made a typographical error, and that should say 24th of the 6th 2021.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's just that we do get suspicious when applicants say they're going to turn up and then they don't turn up. I mean, both applicants, according to the attendance list sent to us yesterday, were going to turn up.
So I think we can confirm that is an error. Are you happy with that, Mr. Mahaffey, and that actually the applicant has actually requested a temporary one for 1 year?
Yes, madam. That was always the premise on which I looked at this application from today when I saw the amendment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Blakeman, any more questions?
Well, it's the same question that I asked to the other two objectors, because there does seem to be a qualitative difference between the current applicant and the previous providers, and it seems a little unfair to me that so much reference should be made to the previous providers and not the current applicant.
Madam Chairman, just to answer that, clearly the issue here is the fact that people out in the street, irrespective of who operates the business, will have disturbance to premises, to neighbouring residents. I don't specifically tar this applicant in the same way as the previous operators, but I have been outside these premises monitoring people leaving in the past, and I've heard people coming out. They will leave. You cannot leave a premises like this in a hushed environment. People will make noise. People will talk to their friends. It's human nature. There is nothing that is specific to these operators that will be any different to any previous operator.
Well, but when did you last visit the premises? Have you seen the current operators' dispersal?
I haven't seen I did observations at 2 o'clock many times when it was prior to 2012. I haven't really been working the night shift myself, but as you appreciate, we have the same circumstances. We have a lot of people leaving a premises.
Mr. Mahaffey, no, we do have to make sure we're talking about the current applicant, and I think Councillor Blakeman makes a very clear point there. But
again, Mr.
8 years ago and a different operator. So and I understand where we go.
Can I just clarify? Mr. Della Marina has said that he hears the people leave the premises. He hears the people in the street. He hears a noise from the premises.
Understood.
So
I completely understand. We've taken on board
previously are arising now.
We've taken on board Mr. Marina's, but I'm just asking for your specific experience with this current application, and we've fully taken on board Mr. De La Marina's and his continued disturbance by the current applicant. You talk about the sound limiter. Do you know when that was installed?
I don't. The condition says that we should be setting it. I have no records on our system about a level being set by the Environmental Health Department in the premises. Maybe Mr. Della Marina could help us here if the premises have actually set the level, and if they haven't, then why have they actually complied with that condition?
I think it goes back to what he alluded to before, that maybe they set it and then COVID hit, but we really need to get to the bottom of this. Once again, Mr. O'Malley, without the applicant here, this is proving rather frustrating.
Yes, but it should be set. He shouldn't be hearing the levels assigned that will affect sleep in his bedroom from the premises.
No, I completely agree. Councillor Smettering, do you have any questions to Mr. Mahaffey?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, it takes a few seconds to unmute. I suppose it's the same issue. Is how do the previous premises compare with the present ones, for which there've been relatively few complaints, it seems. Now, I want to ask you, there's two issues, right? There's off sales and extra hours. So, Mr. Mahaffey, it seems that you feel you're not so keen. You said after off sales after 2300, but we've heard from the objectors, and Mr. Della Moreno seems to have no objection to that, and Mr. Cookson had some reservations, but wasn't too exercised by it as much as the extra hours. Now, I was just wondering, I don't know, speaking like this freely, could one maybe limit the hours of music, but give the extra hour of premises being open, alcohol sales? And we also should remember that the applicant has agreed to a 6-month temporary extension, so automatic expiry. And doesn't that allay your fears a little bit, Mr. Mahaffey?
Well, I take the view that clearly there is a history to the premises. The circumstances are no different to any other premises. The building performance hasn't improved. There has been no major structural acoustical works done to the building. I haven't seen the sound the sound system that is inside the premises. I hear from Mr. Della Morena this morning telling you that he can hear the music. He gets disturbed by people leaving the premises. And the fact is that if it was extended, his ability he cannot sleep until the premises closes. Therefore, he loses a further hour of sleep at weekends. All those sorts of things, to me, give me a lot of concerns for the impact that this premises will have if the license is extended. And even to extend it for 6 months could be 6 months of purgatory for the residents. And I take the view that clearly it's better in the circumstances not to grant this application, because we have concrete evidence spoken this morning from Mr. Della Morena of the impacts, and clearly any later the impacts, the greater the impact it'll be on him.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mahaffey. I noticed that our legal advisor, Heidi Titchcombe, wanted to just confirm something regarding the applicant's request versus temporary versus permanent. Ms. Titchcombe, would you like to?
Yes, I just want to clarify, just so it's clear. So, Keith, you're right. They originally asked for a permanent licence, and they are still asking for a permanent licence in relation to the off sales. but they've amended their application in relation to the extension of hours to temporary for either 1 year or 6 months. So part of the licence is permanent. You are right. And could you just clarify whether your objection is to on a Thursday is to the 1 o'clock extension as well?
Yes, I take the view that on Wednesday is a work night, and clearly a 1 o'clock extension is too late for the premises. I think the hours that the premises currently hold are the optimum for the premises, and to extend them any further would not be acceptable to neighbours and potentially cause greater public nuisance to residents.
Thank you, Ms. Mahaffey. Thank you, Ms. Titchcombe. And Ms. Mahaffey, just with your experience and expertise in sound, and I understand what you're saying about the sound travelling through the building. I know that Mr. Malin has offered to get an acoustic engineer in, which I think is essential, irrespective of an extra hour or not. With your experience, have you seen that these reports and then action can actually mitigate certain situations?
Madam, this is my bread and butter. We deal with these. I think the number of premises that we've actually worked on to basically contain the sound inside the premises is significant in the borough. It's a matter of taking the building up to its highest acoustical standard and then to limit the sound through the sound system in the premises to target the sound so that we don't overgenerate the bass and we put the music where it should be. Now that is common sense. There's many premises in the borough that we've done that in, and we have had such good successes in dealing with it. And clearly, I very much welcome that. It's not just a matter of getting an acoustic consultant, it's also getting an acoustic consultant in addition to a sound engineer. So a sound engineer designs a sound system, he looks at the limiting, he looks at how the sound is spread throughout the premises. And that can be done quite easily. And there's great advances in techniques now that you can use to basically put the sound where you want and get the quality of sound where you want within the premises. The main issue, I feel, it's not just containing the sound, it's the people coming and going from the premises. You can have a technical fix for the building, but the way in which people come and go is a little bit more difficult to control because you haven't got control of people once they depart your premises.
Understood, thank you. And I've just got a question then. So understood about the two main issues. The internal vibrations could potentially be resolved, potentially. And then dispersal issues. I think this is a very, very important issue for all of our borough and our residents in particular, because from far away as well. Have you seen successful dispersal policies? I know Westminster Council always have very strict dispersal policies. Have you seen them in operation in our borough?
Yes, madam, we have a lot of premises that have got dispersal policies. The one thing that we don't do in the department is agree them, because at the end of the day, they're only as good as the people that are operating them. It really comes down to ensuring that the people who write the policy take into account the full constraints of the building, how they will affect their residents, who comes to the premises, and what impacts they will create on the residents. And it's a matter of then of disseminating that information onto the people who are managing the people outside the premises. And secondly, they have to ensure that it is monitored and managed so that everything goes. The problem with dispersal is it's a reactive situation. You don't know when somebody's going to go into a rugby chant in the middle of the street. You have no control over that. But the fact is, you can only do your best in regards to it, but you don't have the full control, and hence the potential for disturbance and sporadic disturbance. And you know, if you think of the dripping tap, you might hear somebody make a noise outside the premises as they leave, and you're scared to go back to sleep again in case you're woken. And it's like the dripping tap effect that will continue here. You have to ensure that if people are outside, that they leave quietly. They don't actually do it, and it's nigh on impossible to make sure that 120 people depart the premises at 2 o'clock in the morning or 2:30 in the morning without causing some disturbance.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mahaffey. Now, would the objectors like to ask Mr. Mahaffey any questions? Mr. De La Marina or Mr. Cookston?
No, nothing for Mr. Mahaffey, but I would endorse everything that he has to say. It's a great submission. Thank you.
I would like to ask a question, which is there something that the new operators can actually basically have in place? You know, because so my question is it something that in his knowledge they can put in the license so that they make sure that the noise inside of the building doesn't? So my understanding is nothing has changed in the building, so in the premises. So is there something he thinks that they need to put in? Should this license be granted? Because I don't think it should be granted. But is there anything in his experience that he thinks that could avoid the noise traveling through the building?
Okay. Right, to answer that, we're looking at an acoustical box within a box. That's precisely what it is, depending on what the premises is going to be used for. It's a matter of ensuring that we have proper sound systems in the premises. It's taking the building up to its highest level of attenuation and sound insulation, and then looking at how you put the music. If you put the music where you want it, you then don't have to over generate it. It's like putting bass radiates 360 degrees, whereas high and mid-range frequencies are more directional in where you put them. So the thing is, you usually stick the bass bins right around the center so that it radiates out, so that you're not actually over radiating the low frequency and putting it into the structure. It's isolating speakers, it's isolating floors, it's isolating walls. It's all those sorts of things that can be considered. We do it elsewhere and we've had a lot of success in it. But again, it comes down to the premises wanting to do that. And if the committee were going to grant it, they could put a condition on the operators to ensure that they carry out works of a sound insulation nature to the building and an adjustment to the sound system in the building to deal with it. But in my view, the best way of dealing with this application is not to grant it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lamarina.
Can I just ask Mr. Mahaffey, is it possible to condition the fan? Because I think the fan is probably more irritating.
Madam, I haven't seen if we've witnessed a statutory nuisance here, and if the fan is operational then and causing a problem, then we'd have to get it along and get it witnessed. But at the moment, we can't go into residents' properties because of the COVID, and a lot of residents are self-isolating. But if it is a problem, then I don't see why we can't meet with the owners of the premises to have a look at the fan and look at the filtration system, because it's not just the fan noise, it's also the kitchen extracts filtration for the odours and what they're doing with it, making sure it's properly cleaned, or whether they need any form of electrostatic precipitators or ozonation into the system to try and reduce or dilute the odours as they are evolved from the extract.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Just to go on about the fan one more time, because on page 46 of the main pack, Appendix E, we have the noise complaints. And we've only got 2 noise complaints in the past year. Of course, it would be quite useful to see if anything happened in the previous 12 months. And both of them are relating to the fan. And I completely understand what Mr. De La Marina says about trying to manage it and not necessarily making complaint there and then and trying to deal with the operators. I'm not saying that there hasn't been other noises, but there's only been 2 official complaints in the pack, and they both relate to the fan. And it sounds as if like the fat filter hasn't been cleared or something. Isn't that something, Mr. Mahaffey, that should be done?
Well, the fan noise could be anything from the motor. It could well be the fact that a bearing has gone in the motor itself, or the system or an attenuator is no longer functioning. I think really what we need to do is to meet with the operators on site, and I'm very happy to do that. Get up on the roof and look at the extract system and see if we can get it done. It's a matter of just getting the maintenance company back to look at it. kitchen extracts should be cleaned and maintained every 6 months. And if you are cooking the type of food that Mr. O'Malley has explained, then I would expect it to be done sooner than that. This is very much another case like the Big Easy down in King's Road, where the kitchen extracts are cleaned every 2 months, and they maintain their system and their filtration system on a regular basis. It's just a matter of having the right processes and procedures in place to deal with the type and style of cooking that they do on the premises.
I completely agree, and I think that needs to be taken up.
Well,
Mr. O'Malley.
If Mr. O'Malley's client is happy to meet with me, I can meet with him next week at the premises, and we can have a look at the system.
That would be incredibly helpful, I'm sure. Mr. O'Malley, are you?
Whilst not recently, but previously, I had the opportunity of phoning my client on his landline. First of all, just to be absolutely clear, it was his intention to be here this morning, and I didn't really want to go into this, but he is his wife is self-isolating essentially, and he is at home self-isolating with her and their 2-year-old daughter. They're also in a property which is quite rural, so all of that combined actually makes his attendance impossible in the circumstances. However, I do take on board that it would, of course, been extremely helpful to the committee and to the residents if he had been able to attend. So he does apologise for that. But as I say, I have spoken to him on his landline. His mobile is temperamental, and I have spoken to him specifically in relation to the fan. He has confirmed to me that the maintenance company were notified before lockdown. This was back, in fact, even before those complaints in May. A date had been scheduled for them to come and look at the plan. For fairly obvious reasons, that has been put back. However, it is hoped that meeting will take place in the coming week or so, and he is in the process of trying to contact them again today. But to answer Mr. Mahaffey's comments directly, he would of course be more than happy to attend a meeting with him and with the maintenance company or engineer to look specifically at the plan. And I think what has been identified by the committee must be right, that the fan, regardless of your decision today, needs to be addressed. And that message has been made very, very clear to my client, and I have no hesitation in confirming that I have no doubts that it will be or is being actioned. So that is what I can report back in relation to that. A query was also raised in relation to the noise limiters. These were looked at again and fixed in January by the company that had originally installed the sound system. If Mr. Mahaffey would like a representative from that company to perhaps attend the same meeting with the fans, and I'm saying regardless of what happens today, these meetings need to take place anyway, that of course can be arranged as well, so that we could perhaps kill 2 birds with 1 stone and also liaise directly with Mr. Della Marina as well.
Thank you for that. I'm sure that both of those offers will be taken up, and thank you, Mr. Mahaffey, as well for offering. And Mr. O'Malley, can we just make sure that if those meetings go ahead, that your client does liaise with Mr. Della Marina, because the internal sound issues are very specific to his issues, whereas I understand the dispersal issues are much more relevant to the wider neighbourhood. And obviously the fan.
You're all understood, Councillor.
Fantastic, thank you. I just want to quickly turn to the committee just to check there's any more questions you want to ask Mr. Mahaffey. Councillor Bateman, Councillor Smetlin. Good, then I think we can move on to the legal team.
No, I think at this stage, well, can I just ask explicitly what? Well, no, never mind. It's okay. Okay, well,
let's see if
I'll discuss it with the lawyer. We want to ask the lawyer questions later.
Okay, so now if I can turn to.
Okay, yeah.
You're okay, Councillor Bacon? Great, thank you. Now can I please turn to the legal team with Lindsay Lemazurier and Ms. Titchcombe to see if you have any concerns you'd like to raise now, please.
Hello, I'd just like to ask Mr. Malin just a couple of questions. First of all, I just wanted to check what the proposed opening hours of the premises are going to be in light of his variations. If you could answer that, please.
The proposal is that the opening hours would remain the same as are currently permitted on the licence.
And in terms of the if the Thursday and Friday and Saturday extension are till 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock, will the premises not be closing at 1:30 and 2:30 rather than 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock?
Yeah, sorry, forgive me. I thought there was a condition, I'm just looking through the licence now, that specifies that licensable, that the premises must close 30 minutes after licensable activities stop. So that would be correct. It would be half an hour after the licensable activities cease.
Thank you. And a couple more questions. In relation to the off sales, which you're proposing end at midnight, your current, on Sundays I'm talking about, your current on licence stops at 11:30 on Sundays. Would you wish the off sales to finish at 11:30 as well, to be in line with the on sales?
Yes, I think that would be sensible.
And the 6 month or 1 year time limit, does that apply to all licensable activities?
No, so the application for whether it's 6 months or 12 months would be specifically related to the 1 hour extension on Thursdays to Saturdays. However, of course, it would be the discretion of the committee that if they felt that off sales should be limited for a similar period, well, that of course they could do that as well.
Thank you. And in terms of conditions, sorry, if you can just bear with me, are you prepared to accept a more beefed up dispersal condition?
Yes, we are.
What else? Looking at your proposed conditions at the back of your, sorry, if you can just bear with me, at the back of your additional submissions. So you've agreed to a beefed up dispersal condition. I think your condition 9, your customers shall be supervised when leaving. That's already in our conditions 12 and 25, so I don't think we need that one. I think your condition 10 is okay. Condition 11, I was going to beef that up a little bit because it's similar to our existing condition 16. So I was just going to tweak that just to include incidents relating to crime, disorder, and being available for the licensing authority on request. Are you okay with that?
Yes.
Sorry, Lindsay, I'm just checking the numbering. Are you referring to Councillor Mayline's submissions?
Yes, I'm referring to page 4. Or sorry, I beg your pardon. I'm looking.
Because
Sorry, I'm just muddling up the numbers.
The numbers
Yes.
the numbers are not tallying with.
Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong piece of paper. So condition 1 of his proposed conditions, that was we're going to beef up the dispersal policy. 2 wasn't necessary, as we've already got it in conditions 12 and 25. 3, that's fine. 4, I was going to add into with words and incidents relating to crime or disorder and shall be available to the licensing authority on request, just to beef it up a little bit. 5 and 6 were okay. And then number 7, this needs to be amended to possibly cover any subsequent TENS applications, and I was going to add in the words, whilst the premises operates until, obviously this is all if it's minded to grant, whilst the premises operate until 1 on Thursdays and 2 on Fridays and Saturdays, there shall be a minimum of 2 SIA registered door supervisors to control any queues and to control dispersal on closing from 2100 until the dispersal is complete, or until 0200 on Thursdays or 0300 on Fridays and Saturdays, whichever is the latest. For the avoidance of doubt, a minimum of 2 SIA registered door supervisors shall be on duty any day when the premises operates till 1 or 2, whichever is the latest. I'll see if Mr. O'Malley was agreeable to that.
I'm agreeable to that.
And I think your condition 8, which is the last one, I think it duplicates our condition 21, and we probably just need to rely on our condition 21, but add in Thursdays, if you're okay with that.
I'm sorry to jump in.
Heidi, I think you're on mute. Are you wishing to say something?
So, sorry, my cursor went over the mute. Sorry, I was just saying that condition 8 conflicts with condition 29 on the licence, which is wider because condition 8 is only limited to Fridays and Saturdays.
Yes, so in fact, suggested condition 8 could be deleted.
Yeah.
And we just have condition 29 as per the licence.
Yeah. Sorry, Lindsay, do you want to continue?
I think that's it. Obviously, if the committee were minded to grant, then condition 21 would need to be amended accordingly. But beyond that, I can't think of any other conditions unless you can think of any, Heidi.
Well, only just coming back during the hearing, there's been various suggestions about conditions. One is the condition about the sound insulation and the extension of hours not to be operated or not to come into effect until the situation has been inspected and proposals have been implemented. So as I understand it, that has been offered by the applicant. I think they may have also offered a couple of other conditions.
I believe one was for the light well.
Yes, that they were going to offer a condition that there should be no smokers in the light well. No staff allowed to smoke in the light well.
Yep.
And I'll just check whether there's any others. They've offered a couple of undertakings. They have also said that the risk assessment and the dispersal policy will be on the website. And they've also said that the variation in relation to the hours will not come into effect until the sound insulation works have been completed. I think that's all the conditions that have been. Oh, Mr. Mayline also offered conditions that that he would accept some conditions about dispersal, i.e. that delivery drivers or taxi drivers should switch their engines off.
Right.
That the delivery drivers should also be limited in number if possible. So they're conditions that the applicant have suggested during the hearing. Mr. Mayline, do you agree with those conditions?
So just unmuting myself. Yes, we are. But having just thought again, I suspect that a condition limiting the amount of deliveries or collections rather is impossible, because we wouldn't be controlling obviously people phoning for example Deliveroo to come to the premises, so that wouldn't be within our power, and so I think that condition couldn't work, but everything else we're happy to agree.
That's understood. These were all just suggestions that were made during submissions during the hearing. So that's why we wanted to clarify exactly what conditions were being offered and what were not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. That was very helpful. And I just want to make it clear that all of those conditions which have been discussed about the fan and about the dispersal would only ever be put on if the committee was minded to grant those requests. That's correct, yes?
Sorry, yes, Madam Chairman. Thank you for reminding that there was a suggestion that during the dispersal, customers would be directed to pick up taxis in Kensington High Street rather than Kensington Church Street. I just wanted to ask Thomas Mayline whether if that is actually what he is proposing.
We are more than happy to agree to contact, for example, Uber and similar organisations, and for them to make a note on their system that a collection point for this premises is a particular point. That has been done with other licensed premises, and I know that it is something that can be done. So we are happy to do that.
Yes, so in terms of enforceability, do you have any wording that you would like to suggest to us?
Well, Heidi, can I just interject it? Just what about if when they do a dispersal policy, we actually have sight of it before we agree? Making it a specific exit point, because there's not a specific exit on Kensington High Street, unlike in some other places where they have certain exits onto a quiet residential street and a busier street, for example.
Yes, the only problem with that is that environmental health, as Mr. Mahaffey said, they don't agree dispersal policies, because the council doesn't want to take in the responsibility of approving a dispersal policy, which then turns out to have problems. So that's why normally these sort of things are separated. What we could do is you could obviously come up with wording if you were minded to grant it. Mr. Mayline may leave it to your discretion as to the wording. He's already indicated the parameters of what he's thinking about in terms of a taxi pickup. So we could come up with some wording if you're minded to grant any aspect of the application. I mean, that might be a way around dealing with it.
Thank you. Yes, that was all very helpful. I've just remembered that Mr. Mahalan, you didn't get a chance to actually ask any specific questions to Mr. Mahaffey, and wondered if you wanted to take that up.
I have no questions for Mr. Mahaffey. I know my place, Councillor. I wouldn't dream of.
Fantastic. Thank you. So now finally I'm just going to turn to our licensing officers to see if they have any further items they would like to draw our attention to or any questions. Thank you, Ms. Dyball or Mr. Phelan.
I have nothing, no questions to ask. Thank you, Madam.
Fantastic. So we have now.
Chair, I've got a question for, sorry, just, I don't know, maybe have to do it later. Just have a couple of questions for our legal team.
Perhaps we'll do that when we retire, unless.
Well, this is the thing. It occurred to me that at least in one case, the applicant may wish to comment like a yes or a no or something like that.
Is it regarding the conditions?
Yes.
So it's a question to the applicant. Right.
Well, I suppose, yeah, because I'm not sure whether it's legally possible, so it's both, if you see what I mean. Right. The one question is, could one consider not extending the hours of music by that time, but the rest of it? And the second question is, which actually nobody brought up, but it just struck me now, that in the submissions on behalf of the applicant, the later papers, condition 17 about the hours of depositing rubbish outside, in particular bottles or cans, there's no provision for Sundays and bank holidays. And I'm wondering if the starting point for Sundays and bank holidays should be made later, like 8:30 in the morning or something like that. Thank you. Those are my 2 points.
Do you want me to start, or I'm able to? In terms of the hours, we'd be happy for it to be from 8:30 in the morning. In terms of granting an application that excludes what in effect would be the regulated entertainment, it would be entirely a matter for the committee. Certainly from the applicant's point of view, we would maintain the application as it currently stands to increase the sale of alcohol, late night refreshment, and for the regulated entertainment. But as I say, there would be nothing stopping you in law from granting part of that.
Thank you.
Just to confirm, Councillor Smethering, I agree with that view.
Sorry, you've gone quiet. Have you hovered over the microphone?
Sorry, okay, that was my fault. Yes, just to confirm, we would agree with the view that's just been given by Thomas Mayline.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smethering. We've now reached the end of this meeting. Thank you everyone for attending and contributing. The committee now has all the information we need, and we will retire to consider our decision in private session. We will not announce the decision today, and instead the hearing on this application will be closed and the live broadcast will shortly end. And a summary of the decision will be sent to all the parties within 5 working days of today's hearing, and a full decision will follow as soon as possible thereafter. Thank you all very much for attending. The hearing is now closed. Thank you.
Thank you very much.